bolts I have still left over, and I'm going, I don't know.
There's always extras,
It
right?
runs.
Yeah, there's always extras. There was a commercial in Lawton, Oklahoma for a body shop, I guess, and they showed, don't go to these guys, and that was the thing. They had a bucket of extra parts to hand the car owners. Like, there's always extras.
These came with the car.
Yeah, so that's right. That's right. Well, good morning. Glad you guys are here. It looks like you were able to cross the roadways and the creeks and everything with all the good rain. God has blessed us overnight with 2 inches of rain, and as I was walking into class a while ago, I saw it still coming down. So this is a huge, huge blessing. So I heard that some people in Derby actually lost power during the night. I was not aware. We thankfully kept ours on. But anyways, yeah, it's such a blessing to have rain. Be praying for Zimbabwe to have some rains, because they are in desperate need of it. Okay, so as we always start, how have you seen God working in your life this week? How has he blessed you this week? And I already started the first answer with the rain. Yes, sir.
Hey, you remember me? And I looked down and I said, sorry, I don't. It ended up being this guy that my brother grew up with. He was totally unrecognizable. He's got over 3 years of sobriety, really healthy, got a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Made some great progress. I was at a conference at Oklahoma Christian a little over a week ago, and one of the guys who was giving a presentation, he and his son-in-law were, I think he was in Tennessee. I think they, or maybe it was Missouri, I don't remember, but they went to the home of the guy who started AA, and you can still tour it. Was it Ohio? See, I don't know things. But they went and they toured the house, and he said he counted, and remarkably, the steps leading up to the door, there were 12. There were 12 steps. So I'm sure that was just happenstance, but I thought that was ironic. Yeah, yeah. All right, who else? Yes? Okay. It was a good retreat. That's good. I'm glad you were able to go. Anyone else? Good morning. Good to see you guys. How has God blessed you this week?
Tuesday, I have a follow-up with men's encounter, saying that I did. I had an opportunity to share some testimony. It's pretty impactful to know that a lot of men think they're all by themselves, struggle with sin,
Right,
like that.
right.
We all share a lot of same challenge every day, and so it's been a blessing to be able to. It's painful to reflect back, but it was also good to know how God has changed my life.
That's awesome.
Share that stuff.
Yeah, and that's such a good thing when you're willing to share it, because somebody out there needs to hear it. And you're right. We all think that, oh, I'm the only one that deals with this, struggles with this, but we all have the same enemy. And it seems like he's been using the same tactics for a very long time. One or two more. How has God blessed you this week? How have you seen God working this week?
He's doing good.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. And you said rain. Absolutely. One more? Yes, sir.
Girls are really encouraging out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go out there and do something, and you think you're helping them, but they're really helping you.
Yep, it's a trade-off. So you're with the Sojourners, helping out at Carpenter Place. Yep, very good. Well, we're glad you're here. It's good to see you again. I ran into you guys at Oklahoma Christian right before the conference started. So, okay, have you ever noticed that leaders like to brag? Have you ever picked up on that? People in authority like to brag about their accomplishments. Particularly, we see it with kings. Have you noticed that? Ancient kings will brag. I was watching a video just last night of some petroglyphs, those little etchings in rocks in Utah. And this one panel in particular is very famous because it shows some very gruesome details. I won't go into that for your sake and those watching online. But it struck me that these people are bragging about their war victories. When we were in Utah during the sabbatical, on a hike, we happened upon a lot of petroglyphs. Like, I'd say, what do you think, Tiff? Maybe 100, 200 little etchings in the rocks. So I'm walking along. Tiffany, bless her heart, is having patience with me because I am just like a kid, just in awe of looking at these things. But there were images where men are holding shields, guys launching an arrow, and it has the arrow going through the other guy. And it's bragging of war victories. And so throughout history, people want others to know, look what we did. Look what we've done. The Sennacherib stone is a bragging stone. And so we hear about Israel being shut in like a bird in a cage, and that lines up with what we read in Scripture. Well, this morning, we're going to look at another bragging artifact that has been found that actually connects with Scripture. So if you will, turn with me to 2 Kings chapter 3. 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 1. Good morning. We're talking about how kings like to brag about their accomplishments, even though some of them are not brag-worthy. 2 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 1.
Queen Elizabeth never bragged.
Is that right?
3 verse 1?
Yeah, okay. Yes, sir. You're just going to leave us hanging with that, huh? Okay. 2 Kings 3, beginning in verse 1, says, Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Verse 4, Now Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to pay the king of Israel a tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after Ahab died, the king of Moab, Mesha, rebelled against the king of Israel. Okay, do we know a lot about Mesha? No, not a lot. But we know about Mesha from this passage here. So he was in this position where he had to pay this tribute, and that's a pretty large tribute. And so once that king that was holding him to it died, he saw an opportunity. And so he rebelled against the king of Israel. And that is what our first video is going to be talking about, as we're talking about how kings like to brag.
So we are heading down from Amman to the town of Dibon, and this preserves the biblical name Dibon. Anybody claim my camera work? I claim Jordanian room. Many of the most significant archaeological discoveries were not found by archaeologists, and where we're going and what was found there is no exception to that. It was actually found by a Protestant missionary by the name of Frederick Klein. I'm standing on the mound of ruins of the city that the Bible calls Dibon. This is the ancient capital of the Moabites. So in the 1800s, there was many skeptics that began arguing that the Bible was not historical. And during this same time, in these ruins, there was an archaeological discovery that was made. An article appeared in the newspaper called the Pall Mall Gazette on Wednesday, April 20, 1870, announcing to the public the discovery of the Moabite stone. In 1878, the Reverend James King published a book about the discovery. He wrote that it happened at a time when skeptics undertake to scoff at the Bible and to assault the stronghold of faith. At this opportune moment, he wrote, the stone of Moab rises from the tomb of antiquity and cheers the faithful and gives strength to the wavering. This is the story of that discovery and the impact that it had. For those interested, I'll leave a link in the description where you can order a copy of my book, which is #1 in archaeology. Dibon is located east of the Dead Sea. on a high plateau just to the north of the deep Arnon River Gorge, today called Wadi Mujib, and next to the important ancient route called the King's Highway. The red arrow shows the rotation of the camera in the next panoramic shot. This is the Arnon River Canyon to the south. And this is the ancient mound of ruins of Dibon. Next to it is the town of Dibon, which preserves the older biblical name Dibon. To the east is the King's Highway, still in use today. Dibon sits on a plateau, where to the west is the Dead Sea. In 1868, the Reverend Frederick A. Klein, who was a native of Prussia and an Anglican church missionary, was living in Jerusalem, but made an expedition on the eastern side of the Jordan. Klein wrote a letter dated Jerusalem, March 23, 1870, where he gives his personal account of this wonderful discovery. So on August 19th, 1868, he came into this area, and there was an encampment here of Bedouin. And so, as was the custom, he went into the tent of the sheikh and was served coffee. And while he was drinking this coffee, the sheikh told him that in the ruins that was less than a 10-minute walk away from this encampment, there was a stone with an inscription on it that had never been seen by a European. So Klein was taken somewhere up here on the Acropolis of the site, and he was shown this huge granite slab with an inscription facing the sky. And this was a pivotal moment because how he responded to seeing this inscription was going to communicate to the Bedouin around him how valuable this stone was. And so he could have acted like it was no big deal. Oh, just another inscription. You've seen one inscription, you've seen them all. Show me something interesting, and walked off. But he didn't know if he would ever see this inscription or if anybody would ever see this inscription again. So I think he did what he had to do. He made a sketch of the stone and inscription. He wrote a copy of the letters from the script of the inscription. He couldn't move the stone. It was huge. It was too heavy. And so all that he could do was take his sketch and his notes and take those back to Jerusalem with him. So after Klein left here, the Bedouin realized that they had something valuable here because Klein got quite excited about it. And so they sent their own writers out to Jerusalem to announce that, that there was this stone with an inscription, because that's what they do around here. They wanted to have a bartering war go on. And so as word got out in Jerusalem, the different agents from the different countries started trying to purchase this inscription for their national museums. And so the German museum in Berlin was interested, and Klein was trying to secure the purchase of the stone for there. Charles Warren was in Jerusalem, and the British Museum was interested. And the Louvre in Paris was also interested. The French agent, his name was Charles Clermont Guénot. And the thing about him is he was a linguist, and so he really wanted to do a translation of this inscription, and he probably more than anyone else really understood the value of this inscription, and he was determined at all cost to get this inscription. Guénot wanted this inscription so bad that he sent 3 Arabs over from Jerusalem to Dibon to make a squeeze of the inscription. Now, a squeeze, think of paper mache being laid wet over the top of the inscription and then allowed to dry. And then once it's dry, then it's peeled off and it leaves an impression of the inscription in the paper. And so these Arabs came, they obtained permission initially from the Bedouin to make this squeeze. And they went, they put the paper over the inscription, and they were waiting for it to dry when the Bedouins started fighting. A fight broke out, and they were attacked. One of them was stabbed in his leg from the lance of a Bedouin. And so you can go and look at the pictures from the 1800s, and you can see the lances and what they looked like that the Bedouin were using. He was stabbed. One of his companions grabbed the paper and ripped it from the inscription. It was still wet, and jumped onto his horse and galloped off to Jerusalem, and his companions were able to join him. And so this is the way that a squeeze, it was damaged, but it was a squeeze, got to Guénot in Jerusalem. After the squeeze was made, then then the Bedouin really knew that this was valuable. And so the bartering went on, and different groups tried to purchase the stone. Eventually, this is the Ottoman period, and so the Turkish government got involved. The Turkish government said, you got to turn it over. And the Bedouin hated the Turks, and they said to themselves, well, we'd rather destroy it than turn it over to the Turks. And this is when catastrophe struck. So then somewhere right around here, the Bedouin decided to do the unthinkable. They built a fire underneath the Moabite stone until it was heated up, and then they poured water on it, and this splintered it into different pieces, and those pieces were then distributed amongst the families of the tribe. When news of this got back to Jerusalem, everyone was devastated, none more so than Geno, and yet he was absolutely determined to get this inscription. So this started this long process for which he and others that were helping him were purchasing pieces of this shattered inscription, and he was piecing them back together. If he couldn't get the piece itself, then he'd get a squeeze of it. And so using squeezes and these retrieved pieces of the inscription, the Moabite stone was pieced back together again.
Since 1873, the Moabite stone has been on display in the Louvre Museum. So my son Barry and I traveled to Paris to see it. This is the Moabite display in the Louvre, while this is the Mona Lisa. But at least there were a few of us excited about Mesha's inscription.
So finally, I get to see for the first time the Moabite stone itself. I've been wanting to see this for many, many years, and here it is. You can see the parts here. These are the original fragments that were retrieved. And then the smoother area here, that is from, that's the inscription that we know from the squeeze that was made. So this inscription dates to the 9th century BC. Stele from the Greek, or you can say stella from the Latin, by saying, I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab. So in 2 Kings 3:4, we have Mesha, king of Moab, mentioned by name and title. And then the Mesha inscription cries out, I am Mesha, king of Moab. I mean, how incredible is that we have this king of Moab mentioned by name in the Bible, and then we have the actual words of Mesha that were written on this inscription coming from that time period. And then it talks about the oppression of Israel by Omri, king of Israel. And so it mentions Omri, king of Israel by name, and of course we have Omri in the Bible. It talks about his son, which we know is Ahab. And then the Bible says that after the death of Ahab is when Mesha rebels against Israel. And so this is a typical victory stele, where he is bragging about the battles that he has won over Israel and the places that he has built up. So one of the victories that Mesha wins is against Ataroth. And so Ataroth is mentioned specifically on here as one of the cities that Mesha conquers from Israel.
North of Dibon is the mound of ruins of Ataroth.
So now we're heading north from Dibon to Ataroth. There are actually at least 12 names that are found in the Bible that are also found in the Mesha inscription. Ataroth is one of them. So I'm standing in the ruins of Ataroth. Mesha and his army are conquering from Dibon to the north. Mesha in his inscription says specifically that he attacked and destroyed this city. He killed all the people in this city as an offering to his god Chemosh. And so the question then is, who was it that Mesha was attacking? Well, it was Israel that was living here. Now this happens all the way back in the book of Numbers that we read about. When Israel is coming in from its wilderness wandering, this is about 1400 BC. They're on their way to the Promised Land. At that time, this land is occupied by the Amorites. And so the Israelites attack them and conquer this land from Sihon, king of the Amorites, and then they occupy this place. For example, in Numbers chapter 32, verse 34, it says the Gadites built up Dibon and Ataroth. Now, isn't this interesting? Because then when we go forward in history over 500 years, we come to the time of Mesha and his inscription. And he says of this city, the men of Gad dwelled in the country of Ataroth from ancient times. He says ancient times because they had been dwelling here for over 500 years, according to the biblical account. So these are the ruins in the entrance of a temple. And then at the front of the temple here, we have a sacred stone, a standing stone. The archaeology of the excavation of this is really interesting. This was in use during the Israelite period when the Gadites occupied this site. They were using it for an illegitimate worship of Yahweh. First of all, it wasn't legitimate because there was no legitimate place to worship Yahweh except in Jerusalem. It was also illegitimate because of the priesthood that was taken from all sorts of people and not descendants of Levi. And so we have the archaeology here. We have Israelite worship going on here, idolatry that is described in many places in the Bible. It's what Israel was being judged for. Then the destruction by Mesha, and then the reuse of this temple to worship the Moabite god Chemosh. And so we have here this amazing correlation between the biblical record and the Mesha inscription that tells us that this city and this area was occupied not only by the Israelites, but specifically by one of the 12 tribes, the tribe of Gad.
In his inscription, Mesha also describes attacking the town of Nebo, located north of Ataroth.
And behind me here are the ruins of the town of Nebo. And so Mesha talks about attacking this city. Now, not too far away from here is Pisgah, where Moses was at when he looked out over the Promised Land and where he died. That's a different place. This is the actual city of Nebo. This is where Mesha says, Chemosh spoke to him and said, go take Nebo from Israel. And so under the cover of darkness at nighttime, Mesha and his army came up and laid siege to the city. He says that he fought with this city from the break of dawn until noon, and then he captured it. He killed the 7,000 inhabitants. He specifically says they were men and boys and women and girls.
In line 18 of the inscription, Mesha mentions the name of Israel's God, spelled with 4 letters from right to left, Yod-He-Waw-He, Yahweh.
And then he says something very interesting. He says that he took, and there's a word missing in the inscription, but it's believed to be vessels, meaning war trophies. He says that he took the vessels of Yahweh and dragged them before Chemosh. And so we have the earliest inscription in the Mesha stele that mentions both the name Israel and the name of the God of Israel, Yahweh, together in the same inscription.
With the aid of another inscription that was discovered more recently, and new technology, a previously missing letter on the Moabite stone inscription has been restored. Line 31 now includes the mention of the House of David, where Mesha is boasting about his southern campaign.
So most archaeology are these walls and pots and pans and bones and dust. These are mute evidence. What is the most valuable thing that you can find in an excavation are inscriptions. So the Mesha stele is one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. In the Bible, we have the Israelite record, and in Mesha's inscription, we have a portion of the Moabite record, and they agree in all of these details. They give us the same names of kings, the same names of nations and their gods. It gives us the names of all these cities, and it talks about the same event. Now, the argument that the skeptics were using in the 1800s and that are still around today is that the Bible was written later in history. Well, if it was written later in history, then how did it get all of these details correct that happened centuries before that? The answer is simple. The Bible is historical, and that's how it gets the details right. And so that's why this inscription continues to be so important today. Some people say, you know, on the comments, well, why are you covering these discoveries that were made all the way back in the 1800s? And the reason why is because a lot of people don't know about them. And we need to know about these amazing finds that speak to the credibility and reliability.
Like I said, we've got another video coming up, but how many of you had actually heard? Yep, I keep thinking I can pause it on there. I got to pause the computer. How many of you had ever heard of the Moabite stone? Okay, I knew Bob Reeves would definitely raise his hand. That's okay. We got two. We've got two in there. To me, it's just fascinating to see some of these artifacts that line up with Scripture. And like he was saying, the skeptics say all these different things, but when you see these archaeological finds that support what we find in Scripture, to me, that's just exciting. Again, we don't hang our hats on archaeology as the reason we have faith, but it is definitely a good support for our faith. Another thing about that video before we look at our next text is I love how he gets to the Louvre. He's looking at this Moabite stone he's wanted to see for so many years. He's in awe of it, and then he asks his son, "What do you think?" Pretty cool. That's all he got. I was like, man, isn't that what I sometimes experience with my own teenage son? So, all right. So next video, we're going to talk more about skeptics and what people, kind of pitch rocks at the Scriptures about. Tell me what you know about a man named Balaam. Do what? He had a donkey. Balaam had a donkey. He's a prophet. You said the donkey spoke. He talked. Okay, why would skeptics throw rocks at that? Because if an animal speaks to you, we put you in an institution, right? And so it seems so far left field that a lot of people will say, seriously? I mean, they do the same thing with the flood. They do the same thing with the Garden of Eden, things like that. People will throw rocks at it because they've never seen or experienced anything like that. And so a lot of people will assume that not only is this entire thing made up, but especially characters like Balaam. I mean, how could that be true at all? And so let's read a little bit about Balaam before we start the video. Numbers 22 is where we'll be.
See videos all the time of people that have dogs that say, "I love you."
Yeah, that's true. They do. The dogs that say, "I love you." Yep.
Well, dogs are just for it, too.
Numbers what?
Numbers 22. Yep, Mr. Ed. There's one.
Yeah.
Okay, Numbers 22, beginning in verse 1, says, "Then the Israelites traveled to the plains of Moab," that sounds familiar, "and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified because there were so many people. Indeed, Moab was filled with dread because of the Israelites. The Moabites said to the elders of Midian, 'The horde is going to lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field.' So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor, near the Euphrates River in his native land. Balak said, 'A people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land,'" in other words, there's a lot of them, "'and they have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on these people because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps then I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed.'" Verse 7, The elders of Moab and Midian left, taking with them the fee for divination. When they came to Balaam, they told him what Balak had said. Spend the night here, Balaam said to them, and I will report back to you what the answer, with the answer the Lord gives me. So the Moabite officials stayed with him. God came to Balaam and asked, Who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. A people that has come out of Egypt covers the face of the land. Now come and put a curse on them for me. Perhaps then I will be able to fight them and drive them away. But God said to Balaam, Do not go with them. You must not put a curse on these people because they are blessed. The next morning, Balaam got up and said to Balak's officials, Go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So the Moabite officials returned to Balak and said, Balaam refused to come with us. Then Balak sent other officials more numerous and more distinguished than the first. They came to Balaam and said, This is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Do not let anything keep you from coming to me, because I will reward you handsomely and do whatever you say. Come and put a curse on these people for me. But Balaam answered them, Even if Balak gave me all the silver and gold in his palace, I could not do anything great or small to go beyond the command of the Lord my God. Now spend the night here so that I can find out what else the Lord will tell me. So he's saying, look, I can't do this, but I'll ask him anyways. Right? Verse 20, That night God came to Balaam and said, Since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but do only what I tell you. Verse 21, Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the Moabite officials. But God was very angry when he went. It's kind of confusing. God said go, but he's angry with him because he went. More on that here in a second. And the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, it turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat it to get it back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in the narrow path through the vineyards with walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it, so he beat the donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam, and he was angry and beat it with his staff. And then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and it said to Balaam, What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? Balaam answered the donkey, You've made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now. The donkey said to Balaam, Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you? No, he said. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face down. The angel of the Lord asked him, Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared it. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. I did not realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now if you are displeased, I'll go back. The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, Go with the men, but speak only what I tell you. That's exactly what he said last time. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite town on the Arnon border at the edge of his territory. Balak said to Balaam, Did I not send you an urgent summons? In other words, where have you been? Why didn't you come to me? Am I really not able to reward you? Well, I have come to you now, Balaam replied, but I can't say whatever I please. I must speak only what God puts in my mouth. And so if you know the story, he says, this is what I want you to do. And then Balaam goes and he pretty much does exact opposite because God puts the words in his mouth. So he says, curse him, and he just continually blesses him. So why do you think when God said, go with these men, then God is angry with him when he goes with the men?
Hoping that Balaam would realize, even though God said it so, right? Balaam would think, no, I better follow what God says.
Well, there's that possibility, yeah. Okay, I've got 2. We'll start with you.
God had already told him once he should not be telling again.
Okay, well, he told him, he said, go with the men, but tell them only what I tell you.
No, I mean, he told him once, don't do it.
Right.
And then he went and asked him again.
Gotcha. And so you think maybe that's why he's opposing him? Okay. All right.
Why are you keeping
Okay. And you had a hand?
I think It was his way to get his attention.
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, how?
You don't always listen to you.
Well, right. And if your animal starts talking to you, has more wisdom than you, yeah, that would be an attention grabber. The footnote in my study Bible, their thought on why would God say go with them, and then he's upset that he went. They pointed out that God knows the heart, and that perhaps Balaam was maybe not so committed to only saying what God told him to say. That maybe he was open to listening more about this reward in exchange for cursing the people. I wasn't there, neither were you. We don't exactly know for sure, but there was something that God knew that we're just not seeing here in the text. And so he stood opposed to him and still sent him with that same message, the repeat, okay, go, but only what I say, which kind of makes it make sense that maybe he was not committed to only saying what God said. Again, we're not completely sure. But people will throw rocks at the scriptures because of a fantastic story like this. Like, are we really supposed to believe something like that? And so they think all of this is made up, that Balaam was just purely fiction. He's just completely made up. This next video is to me, very interesting and quite striking in regards to Balaam. And after this video, I'll get up here and we'll be dismissed quickly.
I am standing on an ancient mound in the Jordan Valley, east of the Jordan River, and this is a site that is known locally in Arabic as Tel Der Allah. A discovery was made here which refuted the skeptics who claimed that the Bible is mythology. And this discovery provided evidence that the Bible is not based on mythology, but on history. So the earliest writings in the Bible are the first 5 books, and these are the 5 books of Moses. And they were written at the end of the 15th century BC. And because they're the earliest writing in the Bible, they're often targeted by skeptics who are saying that they're largely mythology. And so in the books of Moses, one of them, the book of Numbers, Moses talks about a seer named Balaam, son of Beor. And at this time, the Israelites are camped out in the Jordan Valley on the plains of Moab. Balak, king of Moab, sends messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, to summon him to come and to put a curse on this people Israel. And Balaam comes, and as he goes to speak a curse on Israel, a blessing comes out instead because the Lord is speaking through him. So we have Balaam, son of Beor, this seer in the Bible. Excavations took place here at Der Allah in the 1960s, and they were directed by H.J. Franken. And their most significant discovery here came in 1967. They were digging up here at the Acropolis of the site, and they found the remains of a monumental building which they interpreted to be a temple. And the walls of this temple had collapsed in, and as they were excavating down through these collapsed walls, they noticed pieces of plaster that came from the inside of the wall, and they noticed that on some of these fragments of plaster there was writing in black and red ink. And so they did the best they could to get these different pieces of plaster that had writing on them and piece them back together. And the inscription that they preserve is one of the feature displays at the National Museum of Jordan in Amman today. So in general, this inscription is very fragmentary, but the first line of it is very clear, and when translated reads, "The sayings of Balaam, son of Beor, the man who was a seer." So compare that, for example, to Numbers 24:3 that says, "And he spoke his message, the prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor." So the same person, the same seer that is talked about in the Bible is also now found independently of the Bible through archaeology, through the excavations in this site, found an inscription independent of the Bible. So what does this mean? It means that the places and the events and the people that the Bible is talking about are real, and that the truth claims of the Bible are not based on mythology, but on history.
So I like when he jumped off that wall, it almost looked like the fell, but it got away. 1967 is when they found this, and they found this inscription. And that was a huge bolster to a lot of people's faith. But here's the question: what about the people before 1967 who see this? There are some people who say can't be true, and there's some people like, I've never seen anything like it, but I still believe it because that's it. And so that's the challenge that you and I face. Sometimes we're going to run across things in the scriptures that challenge us, that we may not completely be able to understand. But God is big enough to do big things, things that go beyond my understanding. And so I would just say, let these things that we've covered this quarter, and we've got a couple more Sundays of it, let these things reassure you that even those stories may just seem over the top in the scriptures, and find archaeological evidence to support it, let that reassure you that God is big enough to do these amazing things. And so when the world throws rocks at it, just remember, God is true. His word is true. And he is powerful. And he knows how. Does that make sense? All right, guys. Thank you so much for your attention and for your comments. And people at home completely missed that.